Hey, welcome in everybody. Rockets get a win on ABC tonight, 111-107 over the Dallas Mavericks, a team we had hoped they would handle a little bit better at home. A team that is a little bit weakened. Obviously Anthony Davis being out, no Kyrie Irving. They don't have their full allotment of guys, but Cooper Flagg was absolutely a monster in this game. Rockets had their hands full trying to contain him. But basically, Amen Thompson, 21 points, 9 assists, 0 turnovers. This is becoming a common theme now with Amen. He's had a couple of bumps. The San Antonio game wasn't great, but he had an 8 boards, really strong showing from Amen as the point guard. And Jabari Smith Jr. tonight, after missing his first 2 shots, ended up having a really strong shooting night with 19 points. I'm here with the great Ben DuBose. You can follow him on Twitter at Ben DuBose and on Blue Sky, as well as read his stuff on ClutchFans, the blog on ClutchFans, as well as on Rockets Wire USA Today. Ben, I believe you were at the game. That was pretty much an interesting one. They kind of had to hold their breath at the end while they were holding an 8 to 11 point lead for much of that fourth. The Mavs came back and tied that game.
A little disconcerting in that the most efficient scorer on the floor was 19-year-old Cooper Flagg. Now, on other nights, it might have been Kevin Durant or Alperen Sengun. They weren't at their best tonight, and there are reasons for that, and we can get into it. But I'll lead off by saying I thought Cooper was amazing, and it sucks. As much as we talk about the Spurs getting Wemby in the first half of the 2020s, for the Mavs to get Cooper Flagg in 2025, a guy who could be generational might be a bit much, but he looks like he's going to be really, really good for a long time. Immediately after, they made one of the worst trades in sports history, and the Rockets went through their tanking era, so to speak, and didn't get a prospect, at least on paper, at the level of Wemby or Cooper, and those are your two in-state divisional rivals. It stings, and so it's great to get the win, but it is a little bit sobering when you think of the long term and two of your primary rivals, the other two in-states, having guys that look like Cooper did tonight. Now, credit to him in Thompson. I thought his defense on the decisive possession was really good, but other than that, Cooper cooked the Rockets down the stretch of that game, and it was a weird game in that the Rockets sort of held the Mavs at arm's length for most of it because Houston's role players were better. But when it got down to winning time, when it got down to the final 6 minutes and the game became less helter-skelter, more half-court, it was actually the Mavs with 19-year-old Cooper Flagg that had the most consistent offensive creator out there. And that's why they were able to get back in the game and briefly tie it. So the Rockets were able to, patch things up at the end and improve to 30-17. So you're certainly not going to complain about it. I do think the Mavs are a tough matchup. This season series ends at 2-2. The 2 wins the Rockets had in Houston were both ugly, went down to the wire. The 2 in Dallas, the Rockets lost. So I do think that it's a little bit of a rough matchup. Jason Kidd is a good coach, but some of it, man, Cooper Flagg at 19 years old is really good already.
Did they have AD in any of the games here at Toyota Center? I don't think they did.
Not at Toyota Center.
Okay.
The ones in Dallas.
Okay. Those are the ones, the wins, losses. Yeah.
But it feels like they have so many bigs, Lively basically has a gap year, but, Gafford's good. The Cease, the backup they had tonight, at times they've had, who's the other big that I'm forgetting? Dwight Powell over the years has been serviceable, although he's past his prime now. PJ, although he left this game early. The Mavs just have so many bigs that seem to give the Rockets problems for whatever reason.
Yeah, this is going to be interesting with Flagg in Dallas and Wembanyama in San Antonio. I will say I am concerned about Dallas, but we'll talk about the Rockets here in a second. But just Dallas, I want them to keep winning a few games here. I don't want them getting Darren Peterson or H.A. Dabansa, those kind of guys in that team, because they don't have their picks, I believe, the next 4 years, including the Rockets owning the 29 Dallas pick, I believe, or the right to swap with it. So yeah, this is their last chance to sort of form a young foundation with Flagg, Lively, Nembhard. We'll see how that goes for them. But tonight, let's start, I guess, with KD. Just an off night for Durant. I mean, he's been so good. He was 6 of 17 from the floor. Did have 8 assists, just 1 turnover. Really, before we talk about individual players, I should say the story of this game, for the most part, 5 turnovers for the Rockets. They lost the rebounding battle. Steven Adams not coming back. They lost the rebounding battle tonight, but did win the shot, the possessions battle as far as getting up more shots because of only 5 turnovers and forced, I believe, 11. They kind of got a little bit lucky with Dallas going 15 of 26, missing 11 free throws tonight in a game that was a 4-point game. But the turnovers were key. And what I was trying to say about KD, he had 8 assists to just 1 turnover tonight, despite the poor shooting, 6 of 17 from the field.
Yeah, KD and Sengun between them had 15 assists to just 3 turnovers, and even on a night that their shots weren't falling, they did make good decisions, including down the stretch of the game when Dallas got this really tight. You had the Sengun feed to Amen, and then the great vision by KD at the end to find Tari. It worried me when KD got trapped and picked up the ball near midcourt, and then he had the vision to spot a wide open Tari, and that was that. So say what you will, the big guns couldn't finish tonight, but they did facilitate well. They always carry a certain amount of gravity, but they made the right plays off of that. And so you have to tip your hat that they gutted it out. And that's something that, this is the end of the month. And relative to the start of the month, look, this is a Dallas team that they lost to twice, once in early December, once in early January. They beat Atlanta the other night on night 2 of a road back-to-back. They're now 3-0 on night 2 of back-to-backs in January after going 0-3 in December. And this is what you have to do over 82 games. There's going to be stretches of the season when you're not at your best. You have to be able to grind it out. And so I do view that as a positive this month. I think they're playing hard on a much more consistent basis. Like, they're not having the lapses we saw them have against the Kings, the Pelicans, the Trailblazers. It felt like pretty much from the start of December until January 10th. So in some ways, it's fitting that the Rockets close out January with the types of wins they weren't getting for about a 6-week stretch. And maybe it's all the more appropriate that, Jabari Smith Jr. is the guy who went through his slump when the Rockets truly bottomed out. And now he picks it back up. And what do you know? The Rockets are able to grind out these wins in a way that a few weeks ago they were taking losses.
Yeah. Sengun tonight did hit a big shot with about 30 something seconds left that broke the tie. That was big. Was good on the boards, 6 offensive tonight. I don't really, the defensive boards are always nice, but they're, it's offensive that I kind of look at more for the energy. And he did have some of that tonight, but his shot is so badly off right now. And by shot, I mean layups and bunnies and just, that's mostly his shot diet. Tonight was 6 of 20, but I believe he was 3 for 14 in Atlanta and was 7 of 20 against San Antonio. This is 3 straight games after he was 15 of 17, against Memphis, I believe. We were talking about how the ankle was healed and he was finally, he even talked about it as well. I'm not sure, if it's just the role that he had at the very end of the Spurs game, but he was struggling before that even, or if it's just continuing to bothering him and just Santi Aldama's defense was what healed that thing against Memphis. But yeah, that's just something that you have to keep an eye on because right now he's not able to put the ball in the basket very easily. 6 of 20 tonight. Let's talk about, we talked about Amen kind of at the top of the show, but 21 points, 9 assists, and 8 boards, but 0 turnovers for Amen. And I'm just really impressed with, he's been the top assist guy for this team for the last 7-8 games now. And look, we don't know if on-ball Amen is going to be a thing. As far as, it's going to pan out gloriously as him being a point guard or an engine or a primary or whatever you want to call it. We don't know. But we can tell you, I'm sure Ben can echo this, is that they're going to keep doing this. Like, they believe his long-term vision is a point guard or his long-term projection is a point guard, and he's going to continue to have lots of on-ball reps. So, people can fight it. That's totally fine. It's just that's how they view Amen Thompson.
And I think there's a lot of value in that Amen, because of his style of play, his personality, he might have the highest floor of all of your young guys. Like, we talk about ceilings a lot, and there's certainly an argument to be made that he might have the highest ceiling as well if he ever develops a jumper. But I think what we've seen at times this season is all of your other young guys, and it's nothing to panic over. They're all 23 years old or younger, but they go through down stretches. We started January with Jabari, and now we've seen it the last few games with Sengun. I mean, some of it is probably the ankle, but I also think there's a compounding effect. You could see tonight his body language, especially in the first half. It was terrible. There were possessions where, he was throwing his arms to the heavens. He wasn't getting back on defense. He wasn't identifying. There was one play where he just didn't pick up Gafford at all, and Ime looked disgusted on the bench, and Gafford had just an uncontested dunk in a half-court situation. and Sengun was just sort of standing in the lane and didn't know where he was. And I think in a lot of ways, it's similar to what Jabari went through earlier this month, in that when Jabari's shots weren't going in, you could see it written all over his face. The body language just wasn't right. And on recent shows, we've talked about the metrics declining. I think to some extent we've seen that with Sengun in recent games. The touch hasn't been there, and the ankle's probably at least a small part of that. But I also think that the overall dip in his performances, it's led to a guy who's just frustrated and not quite himself. And to Shingun's credit, he did pick it up in the final 5 minutes of this game. So I want to make sure we highlight that. When the Rockets really needed him, he found a way. He hit the tie-breaking bucket with under 2 minutes left. So
I think it was 30 something seconds left. Yeah.
oh, was it?
Yeah. It was late in the game.
Yeah, I knew it was final 2 minutes. Yeah, it might have been final 1 minute. But the point is, like, he stepped up when it mattered most, and so there is value there that you can find it on the fly. But I think all of these young guys, and Reed to some extent as well, like, you can just see it written all over their face when they're going through one of these rough patches, and it affects other elements of their game. And it's not shocking. They're 21, 22, 23 years old. Amen is the one guy, it feels like he's the most even-keeled. And perhaps some of that's just because he has this skill with his defense and his 99th percentile athleticism that's just so rare that he can always fall back on that. But Amen is just so even keeled. You rarely see him get thrown off. And I think that's something that we should celebrate more. You know, it's not to say that the other young guys aren't good. They absolutely are, but there are certain warts that they're trying to iron out. With Amen, that steadiness, and now that he's getting better at limiting the turnovers as well, there's just so much value when you combine that with the athleticism and all the other elements of his game.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about Jabari Smith tonight. Obviously, Jabari's had a rough month. Well, really, it was stacked pretty heavily at the beginning in the first 10, 15 days of the month. And, he's had a few duds, I guess, in there. I mean, when he was really bad at the start of the month, it was abysmal. Couldn't throw it into the ocean. Tonight, I mentioned this at the top of the show, missed his first couple of shots, then hit 3 straight threes, seemed to get it going. And I thought he was good tonight. He had a couple of moments, I think, where, was it Najee? Or no, it might have been Christie, got him with a cross and created space. And yeah, exactly. But overall, I thought his defense was quite good tonight. There were just a few of those type of moments, but hit shots. And that's what is so key with Jabari. He's got to be able to hit those threes. And really, it's Reed and Jabari that we're really hoping will start to come around. Reed we'll talk about here in a second, but it's just nice to see the ball going in the basket again for Jabari on some of these shots.
Yeah, and I looked it up. In his last 10 games, that's dating back to the Oklahoma City game in the middle of this month, he's averaging 15 points, 7 rebounds a game, and making 38% of his threes. So he's right back in line with what he was doing for basically all of calendar year 25, calendar year 25 this season. So it was a bad month overall, but as you mentioned, so much of it was just the first 2 weeks, which was disastrous. From January 15th onward, and it's been a busy back half of the month with 10 games in total. He's been good. He's been back to what he was before, which is like 15 and 7 per game, 38% on threes. You'll absolutely take that. So if you look at it, there's always going to be statistical noise from game to game. But if you look at it in terms of trends, I mean, it's starting to look like that, the first 2 weeks of January were an outlier, a really bad outlier, a terrible outlier.
Mhm.
But what we've seen from January 15th onward is pretty similar to what we saw in the first 2.5 months of the year when we all were pretty pleased with his development.
Yeah, exactly. I think before this kind of thing happened, and don't get me wrong, the whole fan base just, went ballistic on Jabari. Some of the comments were crazy, but I mean, justified as far as that stretch. It was really abysmal, and it's concerning. We've talked about it enough. As far as the mental weakness, how, getting back there. There's slumps. All players go through slumps, but just want to see him be able to do a bunch of things even when the ball's not going through the basket. But just like I said, he was having a really good season up to that point, and as you pointed out, it's nice to see that starting to come back around tonight. Tari Eason doesn't get a whole lot of like a run from us. I don't know why that is. We talk about him certainly, but it's almost like he's just kind of steady and stable. But tonight, it again just continues to be an incredible 3-point shooter, and I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop or something to change here, but no, he gets an open look from three, and he's going to knock it down. He was 3 of 5 tonight, finished with 17.7 boards. Was quite active, +5 when he was on the court. Another good, strong showing from Tari. And if you want to chime in on Tari, go ahead. But we definitely want to talk about Reed. A lot of people have been asking about that in the chat.
Well, I want to lump in Tari with Josh Okogie because they 3 3-pointers on better than or at least 50% shooting. And that was just so important. And when you look at the second half of this season, I mean, the Rockets, they're 30-17, number 4 in the West. They're not far back at all from the 2 seed in the loss column. But to stabilize and to get where they are, they've had to lean on their big guns really hard. And it could be argued that it's taking a toll on them. You know, Amin is second in the NBA in minutes. He played 41 tonight. And to his credit, you know, he didn't show any weakness, and perhaps it's because he's just that phenomenal of an athlete. But KD, I believe, is third or fourth in the NBA in minutes. Tonight he played 38. Yeah, he looked a little worn down, and this was a 3-game and 4-night stretch. Sengun isn't quite that high, but he's up there, and he's been dealing with the ankle sprain off and on for a few weeks now. The Rockets have really had to lean on their big guns, in part because of the injuries up and down the roster. You know, the serious ones suffered by Fred and Steven and earlier DFS, and now DFS is back, but he's playing only limited minutes. And then Tari missed, 20 or so games earlier this year, and Jabari went through his slump earlier this month. So at some point, the Rockets need to dial down the minutes and the usage for those big guns a little bit. If not rest them, at least take the usage down, the minutes down a little bit before you get to the playoffs. And the question will be asked, well, how do you overcome that? How do you win games and, compete for a high playoff seed in the Western Conference if you're going to dial down the usage for your best players? The answer is you get more from your role players the way they did tonight. Jabari is certainly capable of doing more than he did the first 2 weeks of January. Tari and DFS, I mean, a lot of it just comes down to availability. Tari has been shooting over 45% on threes all year. Reed Sheppard is capable of more. We saw what he did in October and November. Like, that is the ticket. The Rockets definitely, over these final 2 months, they have to dial down the usage for their stars. So how can they still win at a high level by doing that? It's guys like Tari Eason and Josh Okogie being available, certainly defending, but also shooting at a high level. That's the secret sauce. And I think we're starting to see, this stretch going into the All-Star break, it's tough all around the NBA because really coming off the NBA Cup, the schedule is, really spaced out in December because of the Cup. And then you've got about 6-7 weeks between, or about the 20th of December coming off the Cup all the way to the All-Star break, which is around the 10th or so of February, in which there's a ton of games in a tight window. And so these teams around the league that have to lean on their veterans, their stars, the way the Rockets have, it's going to get ragged the next week to 10 days. So I think the Rockets definitely in the short term, but I would say just the overall last 2 months of this season, the more you can get out of your role players, and knock on wood, it starts with Tari staying on the floor, the better off they're going to be, because the Rockets do need to dial down the minutes and the usage for those stars.
Yeah, before we talk about Reed, just to your point there, and this is in kind of along the lines of Sengun too. If Sengun's ankle's bothering him, I'd like to see him sit this next game. Rockets at Pacers. Look, Pacers, I believe, just beat the Hawks tonight. Hawks are shorthanded, but I'm not saying it's a gimme. The Pacers just have been pretty weak this year. It is a road game, which is always tough. I don't want to take Sengun out as far as weakening the Rockets, but if his ankle is an issue, look what's after this Indiana game. Celtics here in Houston. Back-to-back, you got Charlotte after that, which would have been a gimme, we thought at the start of the year. Not anymore. They've won 6 in a row, and they look really, really good. Brandon Miller's on fire. Con Knippel's on fire. LaMelo Ball's fitting in. Then you go to OKC to play the Thunder. Then you've got Clippers twice here in Houston back-to-back. That's the All-Star break, and then you come out of the All-Star break at Charlotte and at New York Knicks. So this is the last gimme for a while. And so if he, I know you've got the All-Star break, but if Sengun needs that break, I'd give it to him for this Pacers game. But let's talk,
especially because I think you're wanting to transition to Reed Sheppard.
Yes.
I think one of the issues for Reed in the very short term, defensively, Reed and Sengun is a struggle. There are some matchups where it works out, but I think especially these days when Sengun is a little bit limited by the ankle, whatever you want to ascribe it to, those two together, especially in high leverage spots, it's rough. And I think Reed looks a lot better when he plays with Clint Capella, who offers, more of a backline presence, or in those small ball lineups with Jabari at the 5 where you can all out switch. I think Reed and Sengun together, it's difficult. And obviously, Ime is going to, if he has to make a choice, he's going to choose Sengun because he's much steadier, much better overall.
right now.
And Reed's just a classic guy with his archetype. He's going through a little bit of a slump now, but he needs a larger sample to normalize, to get hot again, to catch a rhythm. Like, he's just the style of player. If you put someone of his archetype into like a 15 to 20 minutes per game role, there's going to be some nights where the stat line's ugly and he's inefficient. But right now, it's so difficult to get his role beyond 20 minutes so that he can get hot again. And so if you give Sengun a break, at least in the short term, then maybe it helps Reed as well, because obviously Reed's going to be out there with Clint or the small ball units more. And then when Sengun gets back, maybe he's better defensively. Maybe Reed is more confident with his shot. I just think so much of the problem right now comes down to it's tough to play Reed and Sengun together. And if you want Reed to break out of his slump, he needs a longer leash. He needs to shoot his way out. Yet it's tough for him to shoot his way out when he's only playing 15 to 20 minutes per night. It's just a vicious cycle. And so it starts with, I'm sure Sengun, if you ask him about this, he'll be the first one to say, I should be better defensively. And maybe he can just fix it himself. But maybe he needs a game or two off to get more healthy and do that. Or maybe, it's a blessing in disguise and you just dial up the usage of these other bigs and you see how Reed looks in those settings. But I think it's the combination of those two right now and the issues that creates defensively. There's a compounding effect in that it's hurting Reed offensively because he just doesn't have the sample size to shoot his way out.
Yeah, I choose kindness when I talk about Şengün's defense. It's been a thing for me. People know I've just been talking about it forever. I think that, last year he showed some improvement, and when he was on the floor, they had good stretches. This year, if you look at the numbers, it's not good for Şengün defensively, but it is what it is. I'll let people figure that out on their own. As far as Reed, Reed didn't make any threes tonight. He was 0 for 4 from deep, but he did have a lot of the CP3 sort of snaking, working around defense, using screens and kind of hit that pull up mid range, which was nice. But defensively, there were definitely, if you want to watch the game, times where they were looking for the switch, targeting him and going at him. And I did think the moments when you had Reed and Şengün on the floor, it was really tough. That pick and roll defense between those two is going to be incredibly hard to figure out. And that's a whole nother discussion we could save for another day as far as, long-term build. But, because Reed and Şengün are two significant prospects for this team, but do they fit? But that's another thing that we'll figure out. Go ahead.
And I also think Reed is the guy who probably misses Steven Adams the most because of the screen setting. I think so many of the looks Reed got, it felt like the Rockets' sixth man was the combination of Reed and Steven. So I think not having that screen setting presence offensively combined with the defensive limitations of Reed when he plays with Şengün, it's sort of a double whammy right now.
Yeah, so overall, Reed 3 of 8 tonight. It was -4, so he must have been, I believe, +6 in the second half, which is kind of more his MO as well. Rougher first half, better second half. I don't know that for sure, but I remember he was -10 at one point. Yeah, I still feel like Reed's gonna be fine. The defense is just it is what it is, and in the playoffs, we'll see. That's still a long ways away, but it could be an issue that Ime will have to navigate, but, that's just the way that is. But I wanted to add on Okogie as well. The output that you're getting from him relative to what you signed him for is crazy. For him to hit those threes tonight and play Okogie for his whole career has been an elite defensive player. People loved his defense. He couldn't shoot threes, or he really couldn't shoot at all. That was kind of an issue. And he's been a really good 3-and-D player for Ime. I don't think he makes DFS expendable, but I bet they didn't expect Okogie to be this significant of a rotation player when they signed DFS. So,
And honestly, that's been the difference. You look at, when the Rockets started this month so slow, it was Okogie playing about 12 to 15 minutes per game. He almost fell out of the rotation altogether. There were a couple of single-digit games for him in which he just made like a token appearance in the first half. Now he's back to playing like 25 plus minutes, including 30 plus on several occasions. It feels like every game for the last, 5 or 6. And all of a sudden, the Rockets are much more consistent with their effort. So, yeah, it feels like for whatever reason, I think that, the Rockets got Tari and DFS back at the same time. And so they're trying to figure out, what the rotation would look like. And when they were at their worst was when Josh Okogie got squeezed for minutes. Now he's back. And at least against the mediocre to bad teams, it's paying off. They still got to figure out, offensively against the likes of San Antonio and OKC, like those are valid concerns. But on the balance, Josh having his role rise, I don't think it's a coincidence that the Rockets as a team have seen their success rise over that same period.
Yeah, before we close, Ben, there was a trade tonight, by the way. Cavs trading DeAndre Hunter to the Kings for Dennis Schroeder, former Rocket legend, by the way.
Sgratio.
Yeah, he's forgot about that. Nice pull. And Keon Ellis, which was the significant player going to, in my opinion. Schroeder's certainly going to help them this year, but Keon Ellis is a guy that a lot of people were interested in. I think it looks like it says the Bulls are getting Dario Saric out of the deal and a couple of second-round picks. I don't think it really impacts the Rockets. The Kings are, nothing this year, but I just thought it was kind of an interesting trade. I'm not sure the whole reason if there was some sort of contracts or whatever behind it, but we'll see if that pays off for the Cavs because that's a team that expects to make some playoff noise.
And by the way, just a general point heading into trade deadline week, someone in the chat pointed out that Capella was good tonight and he was a good signing. Obviously, Josh, for the minimum, was just phenomenal. The DFS signing from last offseason is, that grade is an incomplete because we've got to see when and if he gets healthy and what that looks like for the team. But what Rafael Stone did with limited resources in Capella and Okogie was pretty impressive. So I do think that should give you some hope that if the Rockets don't make a super mega trade this week or something that really, pops with the headline and they have to go to the buyout market, maybe Rafael Stone and his team in the front office is able to find a contributor because with Capella and Okogie for limited resources, I think below 10 million between them, they did pretty nice work this past offseason.
Absolutely. I'm not going to say it's a great win, but a win's a win. Rockets need it. That's their 30th of the season and 111-107 over the Mavericks. Doesn't bring a ton of confidence and hope going towards some of these really tough opponents. At the same time, Sengun and KD did not shoot well. Turnovers will go up, but those guys should shoot much better in future games. So we'll see how this plays out. Rockets will play the Pacers. I believe it's Monday. So Monday we'll be back for that one. Anything else you want to say, Ben, before we close up?
No, I'll just remind folks that Monday, I guess, will be our trade deadline preview show, if you will. We've got Michael Shapiro from Cron.com joining us. So if you want more trade talk, we'll get to that on Monday. And at that point, we'll be like 60 hours from the deadline. So who knows? Maybe we'll have some more rumors at that point, too.
All right. That's Ben DuBose. Appreciate everybody for tuning in and listening and all the support we've gotten on ClutchFans for so many years. So appreciate all of you. And we will see you guys Monday. Have a great rest of your weekend.